The blood had a strange pattern on the wooden floor. It was almost artistic. I remember staring at those stains as I held the knife, thinking that I had finally created something of my own, something I hadn't been forced to do. My parents always said I was good for nothing but obeying. That night, I proved them wrong. For the first time, I made a decision on my own, and that decision cost 2 lives. My name is Mateo, and I'm 19 years old now. I was released from the juvenile detention center 3 months ago after spending almost 3 years there. Many people only know the end of my story. The kid who killed his own parents while they slept. The newspapers loved that part. Son kills parents with knife. Teen confesses to double homicide. Family tragedy ends in bloodshed. Perfect headlines to sell newspapers. No, but no one asked what was going on inside that house before the stabbing. No one wanted to know why a 16-year-old boy would reach that point. It's easier to call me a monster, a psychopath, an aberration. Easier than facing the truth that monsters sometimes create other monsters. I'm sitting in this empty square. As I tell this story, I chose this place because I need the fresh air, the open space. I spent too much time confined, first in their house, then in the detention center. Now I'm free, but the truth is that I never really felt free, not even now. What happened in that house for 16 years? Well, it's hard to even explain. People think that violence is only when you are beaten, when you are physically hurt. But there are other ways to destroy someone. Ways that leave no visible marks but break you inside little by little, day after day. I'm not here to justify myself or ask for forgiveness. What I did was terrible, I know, but I want to tell my whole story. I want you to understand how I got to that point, how I went from victim to perpetrator, how my parents, Augusto and Clara, turned me into a weapon that ended up turning against them. If you're really paying attention, if you're trying to understand what I'm about to tell you, I need to ask you something. Like this video right now. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell, and comment on where you're watching from. This helps me know who is really willing to listen to this story until the end without jumping to conclusions. It's not an easy story, but I promise I'll show you a side of reality that many people prefer to pretend doesn't exist. And look, subscribing here isn't just clicking a button. Those who subscribe are part of a family that gives strength to the kids in these testimonials. Each subscription is like saying, you are not alone. It may seem like little to you, but to me it means I'm not talking to myself. So subscribe now and show that you're with me on this. Think you know horror stories? Wait until you hear what happened when the doors of that house closed. And the worst part is that for a long time I didn't even realize that it wasn't normal. It was just my life. I think I had a normal childhood, at least until I was 6 as far as I can remember. We lived in a small house on the outskirts of Mexico City, but we didn't want for anything. My father, Augusto, worked as a security guard at some company. My mother, Clara, did cleaning work from time to time. Nothing fancy, but we had enough. I remember some good times, a birthday with chocolate cake, walks in the park near our house, my mother teaching me how to tie my shoes, simple, normal things. I was an ordinary kid, I guess. I liked drawing, running, comic books. I had a few friends at school, but everything started to change when my father lost his job. He stayed home for months, drinking more and more. Money became scarce and the tension at home grew. At first it was just arguments, doors slamming, nights without dinner. Then came the silence, a heavy silence filled with strange looks in my direction. That's when my father started talking about alternative businesses. My mother resisted at first, but not for long. Soon they were different, whispering in corners of the house, closing doors when I approached. Suddenly we had money again. Not much, but enough to pay the bills, buy food, even the occasional gift for me. I was 7 when I noticed something was wrong. Strange people began to frequent our house, always at night, always speaking in hushed tones. Packages were delivered and picked up. My father began to look at me differently, as if he were evaluating me. The boy could be useful. I heard him say to my mother one night, "No one suspects a child." That's how it started. First, it was simple tasks. Take a package to a neighbor, deliver an envelope to a man in the square, watch the street and warn if I saw any police. I didn't understand exactly what was going on, but I knew it was wrong. When I asked, my father said it was an adult thing and that I just needed to obey. "Do you want us to go hungry again?" he would ask when I hesitated. "Do you want to see your mother cry because she has no food to put on the table?" Guilt was a powerful weapon, and they knew how to use it. By the age of 9, I was fully involved. Augusto and Clara, I stopped calling them mom and dad in my mind around that time. They had a small drug-dealing operation in the neighborhood. Nothing big, but lucrative enough. And I was their perfect messenger, their front. Who would suspect a skinny kid carrying his school backpack? School, by the way, became secondary. I went just enough to avoid attracting the attention of the authorities. When I was absent a lot, Clara wrote fake notes about illnesses and doctor's appointments. My homework wasn't done, my grades plummeted. The teachers tried to talk to me a few times, but I had been well trained to lie. "I'm just tired," I said. I couldn't sleep well. It wasn't exactly a lie. I really didn't sleep. I spent nights awake in fear because when I made mistakes, and eventually everyone makes them, the punishment was severe. Augusto had creative methods. He particularly liked to lock me in the closet in the hallway, a narrow, dark space for hours or sometimes all night. "So you can think about what you did," he would say. Other times it was food deprivation or kneeling on corn kernels or enduring his screams inches from my face. His breath, reeking of alcohol and cigarettes, enveloped me as he listed all my faults, all the reasons why I was a burden, a useless person who was only good for following orders. Clara didn't punish me physically, but her method was just as effective. Silence, whole days without saying a word to me, treating me as if I were invisible. And when she finally spoke, it was to remind me how much she had sacrificed for me, how her life would be better if I had never been born. "Look what you've turned me into," she would say, looking at her own reflection in the living room mirror. I could have been someone, made something of my life. I tried to ask for help once when I was 11. I gathered my courage and spoke to a teacher. "Ms. Elena." I told her that my parents made me deliver things to strange people who locked me in the closet when I made a mistake. She seemed concerned. She said she would talk to the principal, that someone from DIF would visit our home. That night, when I got home, Augusto and Clara already knew everything. The school had called. They smiled at the social worker who came to visit us. They showed her a clean and organized house. They talked about my vivid imagination, how I was having nightmares, making up stories. "He's always been very creative," Clara said, running her hand through my hair with feigned tenderness. "Sometimes he confuses reality with fantasy." When the social worker left, satisfied with her notes on the unfounded complaint, I learned the hardest lesson. There was no escape. No one would believe me against two convincing adults. The closet seemed even darker that night, and I stayed there until dawn. Over time, I became what they wanted me to be. I stopped resisting, stopped questioning. It was easier to obey, to do the chores, deliver the packages, watch the streets, lie when necessary. I became efficient at the only thing they allowed me to be, their instrument. At school, I distanced myself from everyone. I had no friends and didn't participate in anything. I lived in a parallel world where nothing mattered more than surviving each day. My eyes were always on the ground. My voice was almost never heard. I became a ghost walking through the hallways unnoticed, and at home I became the perfect son, obedient, silent, efficient. Exactly what Augusto and Clara wanted, a puppet they could control, but even puppets have their limits, and I was reaching mine. When I turned 13, things got worse. Augusto and Clara's business had grown, and with it, their demands. I no longer delivered only small packages in the neighborhood. Now they sent me to other parts of the city. They made me spend hours watching certain houses, noting who came and went. Sometimes I had to take photos discreetly with an old cell phone they gave me specifically for that purpose. "You have the face of an angel," Augusto would say, holding my chin tightly between his fingers. "No one suspects you. You're our ace in the hole." It was around that time that I began to understand better what we were doing. It wasn't just selling drugs, although that continued. Augusto had gotten involved in a bigger scheme, something related to extortion, loans at absurd interest rates for desperate people. And I was used to gather information about these people, their schedules, their routines, who lived with them. The humiliation became more elaborate as well. It was no longer enough to lock me in the closet or leave me without food. Now Augusto enjoyed embarrassing me. On one occasion, when I came home from school, I found some of his associates in the living room, big men with tattoos on their arms and hard expressions. Augusto called me over and made me stand in the middle of the room. "This is my main informant," he said, laughing. "He doesn't look like much, does he? But he's useful. Come on, kid, tell them what you found out about Perez." I mechanically recited the information I had gathered about a man who owed them money, where he worked, what time he left, that he was trying to raise money by selling his belongings online. "See, the best part is that he does all this for a plate of food, right, kid?" Augusto smiled. The men laughed. One of them suggested that I should bark like a dog since I was so obedient. Augusto found it funny. "Come on, bark for them," he ordered. I hesitated, feeling my face burn with shame. His gaze hardened. "Bark," and I barked, standing in the middle of the room in front of 4 laughing adults. I made dog sounds until Augusto said it was enough. Then I was sent to my room without dinner. Clara watched everything in silence, drinking wine in a corner of the room. Later, when the men had left, I heard her arguing with Augusto. "Sometimes you go too far," she said. "The kid needs to know his place," he replied. "Besides, it keeps him afraid. Fear is good. Fear ensures obedience." That was their dynamic. Augusto humiliated, broke, destroyed. Clara watched, sometimes intervening slightly, but in the end, she always supported her husband. They were a perfect team, the executioner and the accomplice who occasionally pretended to be the voice of reason. At 14, I discovered something that changed everything. I was looking for money in their room. Yes, sometimes I stole small amounts. It was my only form of silent rebellion. When I found a folder with documents, among them was a birth certificate, mine, except that the mother's name was not Clara, it was Beatriz. Beatriz Almada. I confronted Clara that same night when Augusto was out. "Who is Beatriz Almada?" I asked, showing her the document. She turned pale. Then her expression hardened. "Where did you find that?" "Answer me, who is she?" Clara sighed. She poured herself more wine. "Your biological mother, an addict who owed us money. When you were about 2 years old, she couldn't pay. So we took you as payment." The coldness with which she said that still makes my skin crawl. She went on to explain that Beatrice had died of an overdose shortly after, that they had forged documents to register me as their son, that they had done me a favor by taking me away from an addicted mother. "We should have left you in the system in an orphanage. We gave you a roof over your head, food. They bought me. We saved you," she corrected with cold eyes. "In return, you're useless. It's a fair deal." When Augusto arrived and discovered that I knew the truth, his reaction was different from what I expected. He laughed. He laughed as if it were the funniest thing in the world. "Now you understand, right? You were never anything to us but an investment, a tool. I thought we had made that very clear to you." I didn't sleep that night. The truth echoed in my head. I wasn't their son. I never was. I was just property, something they had acquired, like someone buying an appliance or a piece of furniture. The whole family charade, dysfunctional as it was, had been just that. A charade. The revelation should have freed me in some way, but it only brought more pain. If I wasn't their son, then who was I? I had no memories of my real mother. I knew nothing about my biological father. It was as if my identity had been erased before I could even form it. In the months that followed, the tasks became more dangerous. Augusto now had me delivering larger packages, sending me to areas further away from the city. Once I was approached by police while waiting at a bus stop with a backpack full of drugs. By pure luck and because I looked exactly what I was, a scared teenager, they just asked if I was okay and went on their way. When I told Augusto what had happened, he just shrugged. If they had caught you, we would have said you stole the backpack, that we knew nothing. That's when I fully understood. I was disposable to them. If something went wrong, I would be abandoned without hesitation. Maybe it would even be convenient for them. A perfect scapegoat. The worst part was that I had nowhere to run. I had already tried once when I was 12. I took a bus to the city center with the vague idea of finding some kind of refuge. Augusto found me in less than 8 hours. He had contacts everywhere, even some corrupt police officers. The punishment for that attempt was so severe that I never considered running away again. At age 15, I began to change. Not externally. I was still the same quiet, obedient boy with downcast eyes, but inside something was breaking or perhaps hardening. I began to see Augusto and Clara with different eyes. I studied their habits, their routines, their weaknesses. I noticed how Augusto always drank too much on Fridays, how Clara took sleeping pills almost every night. I began to store away little pieces of information, like someone collecting pieces of a puzzle, without yet knowing what picture they would form. One specific incident accelerated this internal transformation. It was a Saturday night. I had just returned from a delivery when I found Augusto particularly drunk in the living room. Clara was not there. She had gone out with a friend, which was unusual. Augusto ordered me to sit next to him on the sofa. He began to talk about how I was growing up, how I was almost a man. "It's time you learned other things," he said with a smile that chilled me to the bone. "Things every man needs to know." He turned on the TV and put on a pornographic video. He forced me to watch it while making grotesque comments, asking me if I had ever experienced anything like that, if I had ever been with a girl. I sat there stiff, staring at the screen without really seeing, wishing I could disappear. It wasn't the first time Augusto had tried these man-to-man conversations, but he had never gone this far. "Maybe we should take you to meet some girls who work for Martinez," he suggested, referring to one of his partners who ran brothels. "So you can become a real man." Something inside me broke at that moment. The idea of being taken to a place like that, of being forced to, it was a line I would not allow to be crossed. When I was finally able to go to my room, hours later, I made a decision. I didn't know exactly what or how yet, but something needed to change. I needed to do something. For the first time in years, I felt an emotion other than constant fear and resignation. Anger, a cold, calculating anger, began to burn slowly inside me. That's when I started planning. It wasn't yet a plan to kill them. Honestly, I don't think I was capable of thinking about that explicitly at the time. It was more of a plan to defend myself, to set a boundary, to ensure that certain lines would not be crossed. I started hiding small things that might be useful. A pocket knife I found during one of the deliveries, medicines I stole from the neighborhood pharmacy, money I hid in a hole in the wall behind my bed. I also started recording things. In a regular school notebook, between notes from classes I rarely attended, I wrote down details of Augusto and Clara's operations. Names, dates, places. It was my life insurance, I thought. If they tried to go too far, I would have something to negotiate with. What I didn't know was that I was preparing for something much bigger than a negotiation. I was preparing for the moment when I would finally break the strings of the puppet they had made of me. A week before my 16th birthday, Augusto called me in for a serious conversation. Clara was there, sitting on the edge of the sofa, drinking her usual wine, but she seemed tense. "You're old enough now for greater responsibilities," Augusto said, pouring himself some whiskey. "We have an important job for you." The job, as he described it, was no longer delivering packages or watching houses, but actively participating in a collection. A debtor who refused to pay, who had disrespected Augusto. "You'll go with Manuel and Tiago," he explained, referring to two of his most violent men. "They'll take care of most of it, but you need to be there." "What for?" I asked, feeling a knot in my stomach. "To learn and to help with a few things." I found out what those things were later. It involved holding the man down while the other two beat him, and then cleaning up the blood, serving as an alibi if necessary. We were just taking Augusto's son to see the city. When I fully understood what they wanted from me, I refused. For the first time in years, I said no directly. Augusto's reaction was swift and brutal, but this time I didn't submit as easily as before. I had grown up, I was stronger than I looked. I defended myself as best I could, taking and returning blows until he overpowered me. Bleeding from the nose, sitting on the living room floor, I heard the ultimatum. "Are you going to do this tomorrow night, or am I going to keep that promise to take you to Martinez? Only not for you to have fun, but to work for him." Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood. Martinez didn't just run female prostitution. Clara, who had watched the whole scene without intervening, finally spoke up. "You'd better obey this time, Mateo. We have no choice. Is it this or something worse?" It was the first time I had heard her use my name in months. Usually it was just kid, boy, or when she was irritated, failed abortion. One of her favorite nicknames for me since I discovered the truth about my origins. That night, locked in my room, the only advantage of growing up had been gaining a room with a door, even though the lock was often opened from the outside. I made my decision. I would not participate in that collection. I wouldn't help beat up a man, and I definitely wouldn't go with Martinez. There was a fourth option that Augusto and Clara hadn't considered. I spent the night planning. I knew Clara would take her sleeping pills as she always did. Augusto would probably drink late into the night, like he did every Friday. They would sleep soundly. I retrieved the razor I had hidden, but I realized it wouldn't be enough. In the kitchen, I found a large knife, the kind used for cutting meat. I felt its weight in my hand and felt something strange. It wasn't exactly determination or even anger. It was more like acceptance, as if I were finally accepting a role I had avoided for so long. I waited until 3 a.m. The house was completely silent. I walked barefoot down the hall, the knife in my right hand, my cell phone with a flashlight in my left. The door to their bedroom was ajar. I entered quietly. I could see the outlines of the two of them in the king-size bed, the only extravagance they allowed themselves. Augusto was snoring lightly. Clara was motionless, probably under the influence of pills. I shone the flashlight on Augusto's face. Even that didn't wake him up. He had drunk too much, as I had expected. I looked at the man who had destroyed my life, who had turned me into his tool, his object, the man who threatened to turn me into something even worse. There was no hesitation. The first blow was to the neck, quick and deep. He woke up, his eyes wide with surprise and pain. He tried to scream, but only managed to make a gurgling sound as blood spurted out. I struck again and again and again. Clara woke up with the movement, looked at the scene, her husband struggling, me holding the bloody knife, and started screaming. It was the only sound she made before I turned to her. Her last words were, "I knew you'd end up like this." I don't remember exactly how many times I stabbed each of them. At some point, I stopped. I was panting, covered in blood. The room smelled of iron and something more primitive, death perhaps. I looked at the bodies, the scene I had created. The blood had interesting patterns on the white sheet, on the walls, on the wooden floor, almost artistic, as I said at the beginning. I felt no remorse at that moment, no joy, no relief, no strong emotion, just completion. As if a cycle had come to an end, a story had been closed. I didn't try to escape. I sat in the living room and called the police. "I killed my parents," I said when they answered. I gave them the address and hung up. When the sirens approached, I went out to the front of the house, still holding the knife. I dropped it on the lawn and raised my hands. The police approached me with their guns drawn, threw me to the ground, and handcuffed me. Standard procedure for a confessed murderer. At no point did I resist or deny anything. I told them everything during the interrogation. Well, almost everything. I omitted the part about the illegal business, about the deliveries I was forced to make, not to protect their memory, but because I feared that it might somehow diminish the gravity of what they had done to me. I didn't want them to think I killed them to protect some crime secret or because of business rivalry. I killed them because of what they did to me, because of what they almost turned me into. I was tried as a minor. My public defender argued about years of abuse, psychological trauma. Witnesses confirmed that I was a quiet, withdrawn kid, clearly oppressed. Teachers talked about my frequent absences, my change in behavior over the years. A psychological examination confirmed the trauma. Still, I had killed 2 people. I was sentenced to 3 years in a juvenile detention center with mandatory psychiatric monitoring. The sentence could have been harsher, but the judge considered the exceptional circumstances. During the trial, I discovered more about Augusto and Clara. The police investigating the case found evidence of their business. Drugs hidden in the house, compromising documents, even my notebook with notes that I had completely forgotten about that night. They also found the original document confirming that it had indeed been acquired as payment for a debt. Augusto and Clara, I discovered, were even worse than I had imagined. At the detention center, I was treated with a mixture of caution and compassion. Some officials clearly saw me as dangerous. After all, someone who kills their own parents, even if they are not biological, could do anything. Others understood my story and tried to help me. The strangest thing was realizing that for the first time in my life, I had 3 regular meals a day. No one locked me in closets. No one forced me to bark like a dog. No one threatened to prostitute me. The rigid routine of the center, which many teenagers hated, was almost comfortable, predictable, and safe for me. During the 3 years I spent there, I worked a lot with my psychiatrist, Dr. Ramirez. At first, I hardly spoke. I just sat in the chair and looked out the window. But little by little, I found words for everything that had happened. "You were deprived of your childhood," he told me one day. "You were forced to grow up far too early." Was that true? When other children were playing, I was delivering packages. When teenagers went to parties, I was locked in a closet. My entire life had been defined by the needs and cruelties of Augusto and Clara. In the detention center, I discovered simple things I had never experienced before. True friendships, support from adults who really cared, a routine that didn't involve constant fear, a psychiatrist who saw me as a person, not a tool. "You are not what they made you," Dr. Ramirez would repeat. "Your actions were terrible, but so were your circumstances. What matters is what you do from now on." I learned to paint during that time. I discovered I had some talent for it. The art therapy sessions were my favorite moments. There I could express what I couldn't say with words. My first paintings were dark, chaotic. Over time, colors and more defined shapes began to appear. I met other young people with stories similar to mine, but not the same. Every trauma is unique, but we shared something. We had all been victims before becoming perpetrators. That didn't absolve us, but it helped us understand. Those were difficult times, but necessary ones. When I was finally released 3 months ago, I was a different person, not completely healed. I don't think that's possible, but I am more aware, more able to understand my own triggers, to recognize when the past threatens to overwhelm the present. Today, I live in a small rented house on the other side of town. I work part-time in a bookstore. I continue with therapy twice a week. The judge who handled my case placed me in a special reintegration program. I have a social worker who visits me regularly, helps me with paperwork and plans for the future. It's not easy. I carry the weight of what I did every day. Not just the double homicide, although that is a huge burden in itself, but also the awareness of all the deliveries I made, all the people I may have harmed without even knowing their names. Sometimes I have nightmares. I relive that night. I wake up sweating, the smell of blood so vivid it seems real. Other nights I dream that I'm trapped in the closet screaming for help, but no one comes. Dr. Ramirez says this is normal, that trauma doesn't go away, but we learn to live with it, to integrate it into our history without letting it define who we are. I have plans to go back to school. I want to finish high school, maybe go to college someday. I like literature, art, maybe I'll go down that path. I'm still discovering who I am when I'm not being controlled by someone else, when I'm not just reacting to fear. People often ask me if I regret it. It's a complicated question. Do I regret taking 2 lives? Yes, deeply. Violence is not the answer, and I understand that now. But I also wonder what would have happened to me if I hadn't done what I did. I would have ended up like so many other young people I met in the center, consumed by drugs, victims of human trafficking, dead on the streets. I don't know. No one knows. What I do know is that I am trying to do something with this second chance. Trying to learn how to be a person, not a tool. Trying to find a purpose that isn't just survival. Sometimes I look up at the starry sky and wonder if somewhere in the universe there is a world where I grew up in a normal family, where I was loved, protected, where I never needed to make deliveries, never got locked in closets, never held a bloody knife. But I don't live in that world. I live in this one with its complexities, its wounds, its imperfect second chances. If you've made it this far and understand what I went through, if you really care about stories like mine, please like this video. Subscribe to the Traumatic Testimonials channel, turn on the bell, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there now. It seems like a strange request, I know, but it helps me remember that on the other side of this camera there are real people in real moments of their lives willing to listen to difficult stories like mine. And look, if you subscribe, you won't just be another subscriber. Those who subscribe here are part of a family that gives strength to the kids in these testimonials. With each subscription, you are saying, you are not alone. For you, it may be just a click, but for me, it means that I am not talking to myself. Every subscription makes my voice reach further, makes more people hear what I and other kids go through. If you don't subscribe, maybe no one else will listen, but if you press the red button now, you show that I'm not alone. So subscribe, like the video, and comment, because that's what gives us the strength to continue. Maybe my story can serve as a warning for people to pay closer attention to the children around them, so that teachers, neighbors, and acquaintances don't so easily accept the excuses of abusive parents, so that the authorities take reports seriously, even when they come from frightened children. There is no happy ending to a story like mine, but maybe there is a new beginning. That's what I try to believe as I leave this square and return home, my own home, where no one locks me in closets, where no one forces me to do terrible things, where I can slowly learn to just be myself. Whoever that self is, I'm still discovering.